Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN AM for Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. And here are our top stories. What should tech companies pay remote workers? And tech workers fear automating their jobs? Well, joining me now, and he's back, is Daniel Klein, Senior Technology Consumer Products Reporter with The Motley Fool. Dan, welcome back to the program this morning.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
All right, Dan, so I want to jump in here. A lot of us are working remotely. Some of us always have worked remotely, but in some instances, some workers are not coming back to the office, at least not anytime soon. And it's bringing up the debate around if someone is not living in the area in which they were originally working and they move to another location, should they be paid the same wage? You know, the whole cost of living kind of adjustment that typically happens if you're in different regions of the country. Once you get your thoughts on this, weigh in on this.
Yeah, so I would look at it kind of in a different way. So let's say I am a programmer for Facebook, and I used to work in the San Francisco area, which is very, very expensive, and I moved to Costa Rica, which is very, very inexpensive. As long as I can get the proper internet and do my job and work the hours, I might still have to work the same West Coast hours as I used to. Well, I'm doing the same job. Mm-hmm. I don't think you should pay me differently. That said, if you're Facebook and you want people to be in the office, I don't think it's unreasonable to make a housing allowance part of their salary. So if you say a programmer level 2 pays $210,000, well, that's the job. But your job, we'd like you to be in the office 50% of the time, so we will pay you a $30,000 a year housing allowance so you can live in the San Francisco area. That makes more sense than saying, hey, Jeff, you chose to go live in London. London is 10% cheaper than San Francisco. We're going to cut your salary by 10%. You want to incentivize your workers, and if you truly believe, that a workplace can be remote, I don't see why. I would also say, look, I think there's limits to remote. We're all very excited about the remote workplace. I'm a remote worker. I live in West Palm Beach, Florida. Motley Fool is in Alexandria, Virginia. Some of my group is in Colorado. But for the most part, our headquarters is in Alexandria, Virginia. I fly up to Alexandria, Virginia, sometimes on the company's dime, sometimes on my own dime. A lot of the work I do in the company is because I've asked to have coffee or friended someone, found out what they do, they find out what I can do, and when they get a new project, they say, hey, Dan, you want to be involved? That's led to every non-writing part of my job. So now, I don't know that Motley Fool wants every freelance writer to do that, but obviously that have friends internally that do things internally, more people have started doing that. Not right now, our office is closed for at least until the fall, but it's one of those scenarios where if you're at Facebook and you choose to live someplace else, you might be capping your career. There might only be so far you can go. If you don't walk the halls and bump into top management, you might become less existent. That's not always true. When I worked for Microsoft, I worked remotely, and my boss used to get up at like what would have been 4 a.m. his time. I started my day at 7 a.m., and it was very rare that I didn't get a call from him by 7:30, excited about that day's financial news. When I flew to the office to visit, he came down to see me, and my coworker said, that's the first time he's been in this part of the office in the 2 months he's been our boss. None of us have ever spoken to him one-on-one. And I said, well, he calls me every day, and that is not how it works. And being present is a good thing. So all these companies that are saying we're going to go to full remote, we're not going to care, I don't 100% buy that that's true, because there is value. Satya Nadella said it, the CEO of Microsoft. The 2 minutes before a meeting and the 2 minutes after a meeting where everybody's chatting, there's definitely some value in that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that the collegial nature and you kind of catch up on certain things. You can't accomplish that on a Zoom call or a Skype call or Microsoft Teams or whatever product you're using. You can't do that. You can't typically have an aside, hey, did you watch the game last night?
So you can, but you have to work at it. I had a coffee last week, a virtual coffee with my former boss, still a Motley Fool employee, just not my boss anymore. And we chatted for 2 hours, catching up, doing all the things we would have done had I visited the office. We would usually take a walk. Motley Fool is very big on walking meetings. We also have treadmill desks, and so we're a big fitness culture. So we would normally take a walk, maybe get a cup of coffee, catch up, do some work, but for the most part, it would be personal. We decided to do that virtually. I have a Slack group with my closest writer friends, and I try to make sure that every day or two I put something fun in there and just ask how everyone's holding up, what their kids are doing, what it's like. You can work at it to do it. It's one of those things where one of the 4 o'clock, or 5 now, but moving to 4 o'clock on Motley Fool Live, called The Rundown. And it's based on sort of the sports format where you do quick topics and people get to vote on which one they like. And one of the topics last night was, there is no such thing as a good remote culture. And I don't believe that's true, but you have to work at it. We used to have, and we haven't had one in a while, every year we'd have a writers' conference. And that used to be something that people would fly in for the day. You'd have a Thursday of meetings. You'd have dinner Thursday night, Friday morning, a couple more meetings, everyone would leave. Well, that's become something that now, I'd say when we do it, 2/3 of the writers come in on Wednesday, hang out Wednesday night, and many of us, I think, of the like 70, 80 people invited, 60 of us stayed, and I put together a dinner on that Friday night, stayed and had dinner, and then went to the casino after. Because we've built a culture, we've become friends, we have conversations that are outside, we have book clubs, we have fantasy football, and some of these people are people I only see once a year, not even once a year now, because we didn't do one this year, probably largely because of the pandemic. You can do it, but you have to have a really good culture in the first place to build a good remote culture.
Yeah, and I do think that it's a disincentive not to have people in the office together. I think a lot of businesses are just reacting. Look, if you're in Manhattan, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., these large metropolises, right? You haven't been in the office, but you're still paying commercial rent, right? You're still paying for so there's probably a lot of thinking like, okay, well, why are we paying for that office in Manhattan if most of our team is semi-working remotely and can work successfully or has working successfully? And I agree with you. There's that collegiality. And I would also argue that probably a lot harder to bring a new worker in. So you have to put a lot more effort in to get to know that person. Whereas you bring a new worker in, you can go to lunch, you can do all the things you were describing, go for a cup of coffee. Really hard to get to know somebody over, I mean, you can do it, but get over a voice chat.
You need an onboarding process. You need a really official, maybe you need a mentor. You need someone who's bringing you into the social part of the company. And everybody asks me this question. Is every company going to give up his office? Oh my God, commercial real estate is doomed. I think more companies are going to move to the office as a clubhouse, where they have a smaller office that has conference rooms and meeting spaces and podcast studios and whatever it is they need to do their business, but where the actual office is more of just a hangout space, where you bring people in. Some people want to work in an office because they're in New York, your apartment might be very, very small. So going to an office can be an advantage. Some people would want to go in part-time to get away from their kids or their spouse who works at home or whatever it is. You're going to see, I think, less private offices, so smaller offices that are more built around the gathering, where when we can gather again, where they're great for company meetings, they're great for bringing in clients. At Motley Fool, we don't have any offices. Our CEO does not have an office. Everybody has a rolling desk, and you can literally, hey, I'm working with this group this week. I roll my desk over and go work with them. Every person has a laptop. You can pick your style of chair. That's obviously not great in the social distancing era where it would be nice if we all had offices. Yeah, sure. That said, we also have a lot of room, so it's pretty easy to spread out our people and all their desks roll. But we have a lot of conference rooms of every different size. We have about to be 3 different studios. So we've engineered a space that works for us. We have a nap room. And it's the only place I've ever worked that has something like that, where no one would frown on you if at 2 o'clock you said, my God, I'm exhausted. I'm going to go take a nap. That is actually acceptable. Whereas I've told you this story before. In the 90s, I walked into a company and they had video games. And I said, oh, that's got to be cool. Like, you go play a video game every now and then. And the person who was my rep there said, well, if you want to get fired, sure. And it's like, well, why would you have the trappings of this? Like, you can't really see over my shoulder. There's a ping pong table out there in my co-work. And I've never seen anybody play ping pong. But if I had someone come in who wanted to play ping pong and that we were working together and that's a way to get some stress out, I think that's totally great. And I work at a company that supports that. But I do think how we work is going to change. I mean, Jeff, I know when I work at home, it's very hard to turn off. You always feel like you should be working, you're working. Sure. I think companies are going to have to figure out how to balance that. And I do think sometimes we would all benefit from a boss who just says, no, don't do that. Go to the gym, go take a swim. And that's very difficult to manage. And I have great bosses, but they have a lot of people under them, and it's very difficult to track that. So as a society, we are all figuring out how to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, the new normal is here. Well, Dan, I want to go to a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about automation, and it's actually now tech workers who are fearing that automation. So stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
The windows on our homes, they protect us and the ones we love, but they do much more. At Renewal by Andersen, making your home more comfortable is at the center of every window we make. It's why we custom build our windows in America and install them in as little as 1 day. It's why we build our frames with exclusive Fibrex composite material that's 2 times stronger than vinyl. It's why our glass helps keep your home warmer in winter, cooler in summer, and quieter all year long. It's why we stand behind every window with a 20-year limited warranty. Why not help lower your energy costs while giving your home and family the best? Call 1-800-835-6525 to schedule a free in-home consultation. Buy one, get one at 40% off with this special offer. Plus, get special financing with no money down, no monthly payments, and no interest for 1 full year. Renewal by Andersen, the better way to a better window. Call 1-800-835-6525 now.
Welcome back. We're talking to Dan Klein, Senior Technology and Consumer Products Reporter with The Motley Fool. Dan, thanks so much for sticking around with us this morning.
Thanks for keeping me.
That's great to have you back. Great to talk to you again. So let's talk about automation. We've talked about it on the podcast this week on Sunday about automation. Typically when we talk about automation, though, we're talking about manufacturing. We talk about baristas. I learned how to pronounce that word correctly, apparently. But now I recently read an article that tech workers are now concerned with automation. Why don't you weigh in on this?
So Jeff, remember back when AOL and Yahoo were just big giant collections of links? Like they weren't really search. It was just like everything on everything.
Yep.
Well, a person used to have to do that. And then eventually they figured out, no, that's inefficient. Let's automate it. So we've always advanced technology with automation. So things that were once manual, I've talked about this before. I used to help a company that was building websites, and one of our clients was trying to automate the process of identifying which bands were going to be successful. So you could invest in that band as a sponsor early on when the band needs the money the most, but then get a good deal on sponsoring them when they're famous or when they've hit a certain level of audience. And as we were building that, they got an offer from a very major client. Hey, does your product work? We need to identify a bunch of bands that we want to throw some money at. And they said, no, the product's not done yet. And I took them aside and I went, what are you kidding me? I said, get 4 college kids in a room, give them a lot of music, give them an Apple Music subscription, SoundCloud, and just have them pick the bands. Like, you could still do this manually, and when the algorithm works, it'll be 10% better, or maybe it won't, but people just like algorithms. Every job is at risk of this. So as a technology worker, what can you do? You have to keep getting better. You have to keep learning new skills. When I started as a writer, writers didn't take their own pictures. And I went out and I got a camera, a Nikon, like an actual film camera, and I started taking pictures for my stories. And the photographers who worked with us would say, what are you doing? And I would say, well, there's 6 reporters, and I was an editor, not a reporter, but I was writing some stories. I said, I've got 6 reporters and 2 photographers. I need more people who could take pictures. Like, this doesn't compute. You can only be in so many places at a time. I'm not taking pictures you would take. I'm taking pictures we wouldn't have taken otherwise. And they would take my film and develop it in the lab, and my pictures would get in the paper. And then eventually, when digital came out, most newspapers, maybe we'll have dedicated sports photographers, but we do not need a dedicated photographer to take pictures at the Cub Scout breakfast. This is before you could take a viable picture on your phone, but hey, we'll buy $500 digital cameras and have a few in the newsroom, and the reporters can take pictures. I knew that skill. There was a whole rage where doing video became something reporters and writers did. You know, the handheld video, even something like you're at the scene of a fire and you get a sketchy video would actually draw a lot of audience. Well, I went out and I bought a video camera and I learned how to make simple edits and do that. You have to stay ahead of where your profession is. You know, 10 weeks ago, we were not doing live programming at Motley Fool, but I've been live with you for the last, I don't know, year or 2 years, however long we've been doing this. So when it came time, hey, who's going to host programs? Who's going to be a good guest? I raised my hand and said, well, I've been doing podcasts here for 4 years. Oh, and I've been doing tape television, but tape as live with Jeff Snyder for all of these months or years or however long it's been. I'm ready to do this. You need to have the next skill. If you can do things a step ahead of what the computer can do, you don't have to worry about being automated. You know, they're going to automate the Big Mac. We talked about this earlier. They're not going to automate Ruth's Chris.
Yeah, and well, I guess making a steak's a little bit more difficult than making that Big Mac burger. Dan, I just find it kind of odd. So what I know of the technology culture, and I was a technology guy a long time ago, and I've since moved on into finance, but now kind of blending media, tech, and finance together. But that environment is really a disruptive environment. I mean, that startup type of mentality is you do it, you jump in, and you keep adapting. And I find it kind of odd that people in the technology sector, where there is tremendous disruption, it has been tremendous disruption for the last 20, 30, 40 years, would even have that type of mentality, right? I mean, it doesn't seem counterintuitive to you. Like, everything you're saying to me makes sense. And, you don't want to be on your laurels. If you are embedded in this business, you want to do technology, you want to be disruptor, you've got to be able to jump and look before you leap, or leap before you look in some cases.
Yeah, but some people, and I don't mean this as an age factor, they get old. They put all their time into learning whatever programming language they learn. And then when that's no longer the programming language that's in vogue, they end up working in legacy places that still use that old program language. And they eventually become less and less viable. When if in the beginning, they had continued to evolve their skills, they would be 6 levels higher at the first company they worked at. I know a ton of people in the technology space that do something really well, but you look at, geez, are they taking the steps to ensure that they have a career? And they're really not. You have to be willing to do other things. There are writers at the Motley Fool who just write. All they do is write. And right now, and for the foreseeable future, you can make a very good living doing that. What happens if technology becomes so good that we are consuming things primarily on video or audio? I don't think that's going to be the case with financial news, because you can't listen to a podcast at work for the most part. But you could sneak in and read some stories on MSN or Motley Fool or USA Today or whatever it is. But you have to keep evolving, and even in types of writing. I started out as a pure journalist doing news stories. Now, most of my stories contain some analysis, some opinion. You have to keep learning new things. You have to kind of guess where the industry is going to go. You have to be ready. Like, I'm a big fan of cross-training. you take person here and you say, hey, you want to do his job for the day? And you switch, and you're both there to help each other. But then tomorrow, if Jeff's sick, I've been taught, all the ways to run the network. I can step in and program for him that day. That's really important. A lot of people become complacent, or at some point, you might just lose the ability to stay abreast. My son's math tutor is in his 60s, and he worked at Amazon for a very long time, and he left to go to a startup. And he was an older guy by the time he left. And he said, it was a dumb move. The pace of it, the hours the younger people were putting in, it was too much for where I was. And he didn't last 6 months. He's a very, very smart guy. So there are some things you have to think about. Even Tom Brady can't play football forever. And of course, he has the money that he doesn't have to ever do anything again. Most people need to think about what's next. Part of why I've evolved my career is I didn't want to be 65 in 19 years from now, churning out 6 stories a day, even though that pays well. I wanted to be able to diversify how I make my living so I can do other things. And I'll tell you, it's paid off in that the amount of people who reach out to me through LinkedIn and say, hey, would you be interested in this? That number's gotten really high. So, it's not like I'm looking to do anything, but it's nice to have optionality. It's nice to have people wanting you. And part of that is just constantly learn new skills.
Yeah. Well, jack of all trades, master of some, as I always say. Dan, always a pleasure chatting with you. Welcome back to the program. Glad to have you. And we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Jeff.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest or someone you think we should talk to? Drop us a line. And for all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and so much more, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Waiting here for you to take and drink of. But if you're tired of the same old stuff.
Attention! The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services has officially authorized new benefits that Medicare Advantage plans may include. To get the benefits you deserve, you can call the Medicare Coverage Helpline.
Hi, I'm Joe Namath. If you're on Medicare, this is important information. I called the Medicare Coverage Helpline and they instantly looked up my coverage. In this one simple call, they offered to enroll me in a plan that includes rides to medical appointments, private home aides, doctors and nurses' visits by telephone, and even home-delivered meals. The plan also includes dental, vision, hearing, and prescription drug coverage, all at no additional cost.
Don't delay. Call to see if the new benefits are available in your area.
Call the number on your screen now. It's free.
Call 1-800-757-1451. That's 1-800-757-1451.